This is Support is Sexy, episode 52, with Doreen Oliver, writer, producer, and star of the one-woman show, Everything is Fine Until It's Not. Welcome to the Support is Sexy podcast. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, producer, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I talk to women entrepreneurs who share their journeys and the true stories of their wins and their lessons, and give you insight and inspiration to take your business and your life to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I am so happy to have you here. It just would not be the same without you. So today we are welcoming Miss Doreen Oliver, and Doreen is the creator, the writer, the producer, the genius behind the one-woman show, Everything is Fine Until It's Not, which she starred in and which is her take on her experience having a son who has autism and just her journey through that whole period of finding out how to deal with it, having friends and family and people give all of this advice, wanted or not, and all of the things that she went through in that experience. One of the things that I really loved during my conversation with Doreen was, and I appreciate her being so honest about this, but this whole idea of having to find balance or whatever it is between motherhood and ambition. And we talked about that because Doreen had, before becoming a mom, a huge career as a producer and had worked with HBO and Lee Daniels and other places and created a lot of her own work until she had children, and things change as things do change because your time and your schedules and all of these things become different. So we talked about that, how she navigated that, and then how she got to the point of creating this fantastic work, which has received just rave reviews. So on this episode, you will learn how to recognize when it's time for a change of pace. Also, the benefits of getting back to your goals after motherhood, finding the thing that lights you up and that is just for you, how to be an advocate for yourself and your needs as a mom. This I thought was really great. Don't be afraid to inconvenience those you love. You'll hear more about that in here. Doreen has a great theory on that. Have realistic expectations for yourself and others. And share your goals with other people because you will be surprised where the support shows up. But you know, I'm all about it because support is sexy. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode with Doreen. She was really a joy to talk to. So without further ado, Doreen Oliver. So Doreen, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Now, first question I ask everyone, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
When I figured out how to pursue my passion outside of my day-to-day, and my day-to-day job, I think, when I was after college, I started working in advertising, at a fairly large advertising agency, which no longer exists, actually. And I thought that advertising would be perfect. It was something safe, quote unquote, in corporate America, as my parents were very proud for me to have that kind of job where I actually was making more money than, or almost as much money as one of my parents. And so they were very proud of that. And I was like, okay, it's secure, as so I thought before all the layoffs happened. But, you know, and I also thought it was creative, but I was working in account management. And so it was like my soul was being sucked out of my body on a daily basis. Just with the corporate hierarchy, I wasn't doing the things that I loved, it was storytelling. Every job that I've ever had was storytelling. And I believe that's true for advertising and marketing. But I felt like it wasn't doing it on a sort of a higher level that was always interesting to me. So after about a year and a half into the job, I started my own business producing talent shows, talent showcases called Frustrated Artists in Corporate America, because I wanted to get back to singing. And in my head, I was like, oh, this will be a great opportunity. You know, I'll be singing, and then I'll have all my other friends doing whatever their talent was. We had comedians, we had poets, we had musicians, and I was like, this will be so great. I can just get back and do the things that I love. And then I realized I was the business took over everything.
Mm-hmm.
Just the business of auditioning talent and securing the venue. And then after it became successful, of course, the venue wanted a different deal. And so it was doing all sorts of all that kind of stuff. And I soon was no longer performing in it, but it was great because I was like, wow, I can do all this. Like, I don't have to do all this for someone else. I can do this for myself on my own schedule in the way that I envision it. And it was fantastic. And so that was when I realized that, oh, wow, like I do have this gift of effectively producing, which I wasn't sure at the time that I was doing, but yes, that's what I was doing. And I was doing it on my own terms, and I was an entrepreneur. And that's when I fell in love with it.
I love that. Now that sort of, it basically showed you what the possibilities were, right? Like you sounds like you were interested in doing that, obviously, and then you did it. But then once you kind of see it working, does it expose you to, oh, this is actually a possibility for me?
Yeah, I mean, it did in the fact that I learned a couple things. I learned that it could be successful. We always had sold out showcases, and we never were lacking for people interested in auditioning. But then it also told me I needed to learn a lot more about entrepreneurship. Like I needed to know a lot more about running a business and, still always having that sort of security blanket or thinking that there is a security blanket out there. I went to graduate school. I went to business school from there because I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And so I went to Stanford, which at the time and still is like one of the best places you could ever go for entrepreneurship. And so that's one of the reasons why I chose it. And I got a fellowship, which paid for my business school, which was amazing. So
Nice.
Yeah, so that's where I went.
Now, originally you're from New Jersey, right?
Yes.
Is it Newark or where are you from in New Jersey?
I was born in Newark, yep, and I was raised in Montclair.
What was Doreen like as a child?
Oh, I was so goofy, and I still am really goofy, or I can be with those fortunate enough to love me unconditionally. Yeah, I was really goofy. I sort of went, I sort of beat my own drum, but I also, I read a lot. I loved reading. And we had a huge, and we still do, have a huge family. So I had so many first cousins, many of whom were in Newark even after I lived in Montclair. And my grandmother was in Newark and my church was in Newark. So I felt always very grounded in who I was and where I came from. Even after I, went to private schools, et cetera, I always felt very grounded. And yeah, I mean, I think that, I was just a goofy child that loved jokes and loved to laugh, and I loved the arts. And then I think as I came older, middle school to high school, I was very much focused on African American issues and sort of representing that in my school and, very interested. I mean, I thought I wanted to be a congresswoman in high school. So
interesting. Yeah. Now, who were some of your greatest influences growing up?
I would definitely, it definitely, I mean, if you've seen my show, you would agree that I would say my mother, both my parents for sure. My mother's a lot more outspoken, so she's easily someone to reference.
Mm-hmm. She has more material.
So much more material. Which, she thinks that she's like, you're always talking about me. But, I mean, you always have something wonderful to say. And I would definitely say, she and my father, they really influenced, they gave me a very strong cultural education. And so I was always, I remember reading an I Can Read Martin Luther King book at like 4 or 5. I remember, learning a lot about my history at an early age. So, at the time when I was in high school, I was very interested in Maxine Waters, and I was very, but I had a lot of different influences. I gobbled up the books of Judy Blume when I was in third and fourth grade, probably younger, which is probably not appropriate, but yeah, I mean, I gobbled up her books at a very early age, which taught me a lot about other cultures. And yeah, I those were a lot of my influence. And I always loved arts and music. So although I probably couldn't tell you who I was most influenced by until college, because then I sort of, those were some of the people that sort of saved my life in a way. So, but yeah, and when I was growing up, I would say it's definitely my family, and all the people that they introduced to me.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you went to Stanford Business School and you graduated from Yale undergrad, right?
I did.
Now, just now, though, you mentioned that some of the people who saved your life in college through music. Can you tell us some about that?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I sort of discovered I had known about Stevie Wonder before, but I started really getting into him in college. I probably discovered him on my own, I guess, if that, you know, I got to know him more on a personal level.
Right. Right.
Through his music, freshman year, but sophomore year was just a very difficult year for me for many reasons. And I remember just going to my dorm room and listening to all of his music, any music that I could get my hands on. And Sweet Honey in the Rock was also a very big influence just for their music. Also, I was in an a cappella singing group at Yale, and I was a musical director at that time. So I was also blossoming in my understanding of music and music leadership. And so I just loved them from a musical standpoint, but also from a cultural perspective. They were very important to me. I would say for Stevie Wonder, I also discovered Donny Hathaway at that time. And I also, you know, a big book that was a huge influence to me was Ntozake Shange's For Colored Girls. Yeah, that choreo poem was really made a difference in my life. So yeah, those were some of the artists that really influenced me during college.
Now, was your plan at the time when you were in school always to go into entertainment or the arts, or did you have other ideas at the time, or did you not know, like a lot of us in college?
You know, I think as we talk, we discover this pattern where I think I can always be safe, right? Find the secure route. So when I was at Yale, I became a history major because history was such a great, you know, major. I had done well in it. It was the most popular major at Yale. You know, obviously Yale was very strong in it, and so I did it. Although I don't really believe in many regrets, and I still don't. But if I were to do Yale over again, I would be a theater studies major for sure. So I don't know what I thought I was going to be after I graduated. I definitely didn't have any idea that I was going to be in advertising.
Right.
I think I probably still thought I was going to be you know, when I started, I was going to be a congresswoman maybe, but I know by my senior year, I'm sure that wasn't the case. Yeah, I mean, I feel at Yale, I was able to do so many artistic things. And I think that's also the first time I was able to manage something. I was rush manager for our singing group, and you know, I helped produce a show that a friend and I co-created, and so I think that was also probably the time where I developed some of the skills that I would use later in my career doing the things that I actually really loved.
Now, how did you make that transition into doing the things that you love and working in entertainment and in the arts?
Yeah,
because you were at the advertising firm, and then was it after that time once you started doing, as you mentioned earlier, the talent showcases?
Yeah, I mean, I think doing the talent showcases was a big turning point. And you know, it's so crazy. I will just say this just because some of your listeners might be, you know, interested in this advice. But I remember I would do all my work, but then at my computer, I would like sort of design my flyers, and I would put my office number on my flyers for my show.
Oh my goodness.
Which I know, like it makes no, you know, I mean, nowadays, of course, everybody has cell phones, but I don't think I did the first time I was doing it. And so, yeah, I mean, they all ended up knowing what I was doing. And then I was very good at my job. So I don't think, you know, no one had any no one was questioning me about it. I mean, if anything, I think because I was good at my job and I also started to have this side life, I think they were more interested in trying to do what they could to sort of keep me. But that could work in the reverse. So always, I always say, like, always have your stuff together at work first. But anyway, that was the first, yes, doing the show was the first thing that sort of ignited my interest to go outside of corporate America. And then I knew once I got into Stanford, I got a fellowship that I had to work for, and I had to defer my year at Stanford and work at, also I had to work in marketing at a pharmaceutical company, which was a wonderful opportunity for so many reasons. But in terms of serving my soul, it did not. But so I realized then I was like, this is going to be my last stint. Like I just sort of, I was like, okay, this is an obligation that I have. I'm very thankful for it because it allows me to go to business school. And I learned, quite honestly, more than anything I learned that year in marketing, I learned so much about the politics of corporate America that proves to be invaluable to me to this day.
Those are transferable skills.
Oh, yes. and then, but that was my last full-time corporate gig. And then when I went to business school, I knew I wanted to do entertainment. And so that's what I focused on.
And what would you say was your first step toward working in the entertainment industry? As far as actually getting a career, I should say. You were already creating things in the field, but...
Right. Well, while I was in business school, I did do internships, and I worked for, well, I guess I worked for a summer at HBO in original programming, and that opened my eyes to such a great world of storytelling. I mean, especially when I was there, no one did it like HBO, nobody. And to be able to, my job was to read scripts and to write notes on them and to cover them and, just be able to see how good storytelling is done was an extraordinary opportunity. And when I graduated, I ended up working for Lee Daniels. And then that was a whole nother level of learning, which was fantastic.
And you were with Lee Daniels for 4 years, or Lee Daniels Entertainment for 4 years, right?
About
4 years.
Yeah, I was there for approximately that time, and I left when I had a child.
So I was going to ask, that was going to be my next question. Perfect. I noticed that you worked with Lee Daniels Entertainment, and then you, as you mentioned, you worked at HBO, and you had produced all these showcases, and you obviously an ambitious woman doing a lot of wonderful things. And then, according to your bio, you were doing a lot of those things when you had more time and less children.
Yes.
So I was going to ask you, how did having children shift things for you as an ambitious and busy woman, and how did you manage that transition?
I think I'm still managing it. I think your priorities change. You find that a lot of your ambition goes towards your children in many ways. I remember writing to someone about everything I've ever learned, whether it's learning how to do an Excel spreadsheet or, producing, on a certain budget or, writing letters, business letters or writing essays. Everything I've ever learned in my life all come into play when you're advocating and supporting your children. Everything. And having, I have 2 sons, they're African American like me. And, one child has autism. And so, you just need to know how to communicate with all sorts of people, both adults and children. And, it's a huge job. And so I think there's parts of your life that are completely and 100% focused and dedicated on that. And then, but there is that part of you that is wanting to do something that has nothing to do with your children.
Right.
And I think that's where I was earlier. I mean, I've been there in various points over the last several years, but I think that's what sort of pushed me to do the show. even
Yeah.
though it has everything to do with my,
Everything to do with your son.
with my
Exactly.
children, but it's a life outside of them. Um,
Right. The work is a life outside of them.
exactly, exactly.
Now, in an interview, you mentioned that in January you felt quote unquote dead inside and that you weren't doing what God put you on this earth to do, which was create, and that you felt like you had forgotten about some of your goals. How did you get through that period of time in your life? And was that sort of when the play and the memoir that you're working on started to come into shape?
Well, I had started writing in general several years ago. I guess after I had when my after about a year after my first child was born, um, I had started writing because inherently I am a storyteller, whether it's in film, whether I'm creating a showcase of various, talented people to, curating that, or, in whatever, or writing songs, which I've done before in my life. Like, so I've always been a storyteller, and it manifested itself in writing prose several years ago. I would say about 8 years ago now or more. Um, and so I had, obviously a lot of the stuff had been about my children or my child at the time. And I'd published a number of essays, New York Times and Washington Post and some other places. But the show came out because I remember going to this writer's workshop, a wonderful writer's workshop. And I remember with all these very talented writers, talking about their latest work. And then I remember having lunch, and the way that some people were talking about authors or specific words was the way I had always felt about performance. And I realized that that's needed to be back in my life. And this January, I had gone to see a movie, and it sort of triggered something inside of me. And I was like, I sort of came to this revelation that I have not been creating in a very long time in the way that I love to. And I had to do something about it. And because I had learned, because my life was so focused on my children, I had to learn. I didn't really want for myself anymore, even though my body did, and my spirit, spiritually, I believe I did, which is why I was so sad.
Mm-hmm.
But my head, I was not making, there was no conscious decision that I was making that was about me. My conscious decision making was all focused on what would be in the best interest of my children or the family at large. And they were never specific to me as an individual. And so I sort of forgot about what was important, because the things to me, and because I thought, even if I fleetingly thought, oh, I would love to do this a beat later would be like, oh, well, that would mess up so-and-so's bedtime, or that would really interfere with him going to therapy, or this one going to soccer, or, you know what I mean? It was like,
Mm-hmm.
it was all, speech therapy or soccer. So it was always, I was never a top priority in my own life. And I just realized that had to change. And I talked to my husband about it. And I was like, he was like, whatever. Like, I want you to be happy. I want you to feel great. Like, I want you, to be the woman that, you love being and that I love being around. And I said to him, I said, okay, great. And I said, you know what? This is going to be really inconvenient.
Right.
For
That's
everybody.
honest.
Like, I was just warning. Like, it's going to be really inconvenient. And it was, but it was also great for me. And I think, I always believe that, it's great for children, especially, people say especially girls, but I also think especially boys. I think for all children to see their mother work, do something they're passionate about, whatever it is, feel accomplished in some way. So, in whatever way. So yeah, so it's been very good. It's been very hard, and it's been very great.
Now, how important do you think it is for moms especially to sort of hang on to, in whatever way they can, that thing that really drives them? As you mentioned, you had this movie, it was, that triggered for you just hey, I've forgotten about some of the things that I love to do. And, you didn't want to inconvenience anybody else at that time and sort of forgot about yourself. So how important is it to stay in tune to that? And then I think what you just mentioned is brilliant, to have the conversation with whoever you need to say, this is what I'm doing, or this is what I need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important for mothers or parents and to remember the things that they love to do and what makes them them. For me, I felt like I had a purpose from God that I wasn't completely fulfilling, and so it made me very sad and lost in many ways. I think we also need to have very realistic expectations of ourselves, and the fact that, we all have limited resources, time, money, what have you. And so we have to figure out how can we do for ourselves within those resources. And I think that I am very lucky that I have not a whole lot of resources, but I have enough where I know that, okay, my bills can be paid, and then I can sort of start doing this production. You know what I mean? And
right.
I think that we all need to figure out how, within our means and within our resources, to do what we can to be fulfilled, and figure it out. I do. I think it's very hard. I think it's harder for some than for others, just because some people have, more limited resources, or more limited time, or have more kids, or have, or whatever it is.
Right. Everybody's circumstance is different.
Everybody's circumstances are completely different. But I think what I do believe for all people is that we have to advocate for ourselves to do it. Because I would talk to, I would say to my husband or my friends, I would say to my friend who's dealing with something like this now, that, your family loves you tremendously. But if you fill a certain role in their lives that makes things easier for them, they're not going to be shouting from the mountaintop for you to change your role that would make things less easy for them.
Right.
Because it's not, I don't think it's not ill-spirited. Nobody is wishing bad on you. It's that, they're not going to say, you know what? Let me stop, doing whatever it is, that makes things easier for me, and I'll give it to, it's not something that I think is necessarily voluntary or instinctive, or that they would even think about.
Because people get caught up in routines also, right?
Exactly.
Right.
People get very caught up in routines, and, I think it's not necessarily the person is taking for granted, but the situation is taken for granted. Mm-hmm. The circumstances are taken for granted, that this person, let's say me, Doreen Oliver, like, she's always home. So I know if I'm my child, I know that I can come home and start telling you everything. Or my husband can come home and just start downloading about their day, because she's not doing anything else.
Right. She's just home. She's there waiting for me to do this.
Or this or that, or whatever it is. So I think that, there will be disruption. There will be disruption. And everything has a cost. Mm-hmm. Following your dreams or following your passions is not going to be, is not going to solve every problem. It'll just make different ones.
Interesting. Now, one of the fabulous things that you ended up creating after that time is your solo play, Everything is Fine Until It's Not. I love that title, which received rave reviews when it premiered in August and was the fastest sellout in Fringe NYC history, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
It's 20-year history, yes.
That is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I wish I had a chance to see it. I didn't hear about it until after, but I'm sure we'll talk about that. Hopefully it's coming somewhere again.
Yes.
Now tell us about the premise of the play, and as you mentioned, some of it, how it came to be.
Yeah, the story chronicles my journey with my son, who has autism, my oldest child who has autism. And it's really about, and it also looks a little bit, it's basically about how we put expectations on our children that are sometimes too great for them to live up to.
Mm-hmm. And how old
So
is your son now? Sorry
he's
to.
10.
Okay.
And so it's about, for me, I was going to sort of cure my child of autism, as was the terminology a few years ago by certain people in the media. And yeah, so that was like, okay, we diagnosed him young. I'm going to get, we're going to get all these services. We're going to do all this stuff. And sooner or later, I don't really say this, but in my head, it's sort of, I'm thinking that that's what's going to happen. And so it's about that, but it's also a lot about my relationship with my mother. It sort of mirrors that because it's not, I think the reason why it's been so well received is because it's a very universal parenting story. So if you have a mother and you don't have kids, or if you've ever had a mother, or if you are starting out on your parenting journey, it's a very, I think it's universal. It's, you don't have to have a child with autism to understand the show, because a lot of it, and I remember there was a guy who came to see a workshop of it. He was single. He doesn't know anybody with autism. He's fairly young, gay man. And he was like, I totally get this because it's not just about what happens when you put certain expectations on people that you love and that they can't fulfill. It's about what happens. How do you cope? Mm-hmm. When you realize that they're not going to fulfill these expectations, that you've basically, created your life around this expectation. So how do you cope when you learn that you can't protect your children necessarily from certain things? So yeah, I think that's it. What I hope to do, and I from what people tell me, it's been someone successful in doing, is that it's about how do you cope when things don't turn out the way you think they will.
And for you, were those expectations around, as you said, quote unquote, curing your son of autism? Is that what it primarily was at that time?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell us about, like I said, I love the title, Everything is Fine Until It's Not. Tell us about a time that you remember when everything was fine.
In my life in general?
Yes.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think, newly married. I think like, I don't know, when I had done, I don't know. I don't know if I think about things that way anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I think about things that way anymore. It's a great question, and I have to think about things. But I feel like they're moments.
Right.
I don't feel like there's a period of time where everything is fine because perfect or everything is fine. Some things can be fine and some things can be, difficult. Mm-hmm. I think about the time when, we had I think about moments at the beach when all four members of our family are just soaking in the sun and, going, digging our fingers deep into the sand, or almost falling asleep, or, reading or playing in the water. Like, those are moments that are perfect and wonderful. And I think, those moments happen, or there's everyone has great weeks or at school, or someone's in, a child is in a production that he does amazing in, or both children are in a production that they do fantastic at. I do think that there are moments where everything is just wonderful, but I also think that there's no set period of time that every single thing is fine or perfect, and that you have to still, that doesn't mean you can't rejoice in the things that are great. You just have to live through the things that sort of stink.
Right. During the times when it's not.
Yeah.
As it says, until it's not. Yeah, I think thank you for answering that question. I know that was a tough one, but I love that it's sort of like just making sure that you remember or take note of or really indulge in those moments when everything is fine, because it's moment to moment, like you said.
Yeah, and even when things really feel like everything sucks, like it's just remembering that they're not going to suck forever, and that there will be like great things to come, and we'll just look forward to that. Like, you know what I mean? So it's all very cyclical.
My friend Erica, she has a very close friend of mine. She has a child with special needs. He's wonderful, and one of the things she always says is things don't have to be perfect to be perfect.
Right.
Yeah. You find what's perfect about the moments.
Exactly. It's very true.
Now, tell us, is there a plan to bring the play back? I know ran in August. Are you working on, not to give you more to do, because I know you're a very busy woman.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. What's your vision for it?
Yeah, my vision for it is to go to various cities around the country, and I'm working towards that right now. So, so that's what we're looking to do. And also I am working on a book based on, well, I am still working on the same book. It was interesting how the show came first, but yeah, it's based on a book that I have been working on for a while now.
With the show coming first, was it during that period where you were in the writer's workshop, as you said, and you sort of felt like I could bring this story to life in a different way, or is it a separate part of the story?
No, I mean, I think it's a streamlined version of the book. The play sort of happened because the play happened first because I happened to get into this festival first. I mean, that's kind of why it started. And I think it was a great way to use all the gifts that I think, I've been graced with. So I produced it, and then I wrote it, and then I performed it, and then I did some singing in it. And so it was wonderful, and so hard, and so terrifying. But it made me, I just feel it's a joy to remember all the things that I've been able to learn and experience and share with the world. So in that way, it's been fantastic.
And I think it's beautiful that from what you told us, just going through that period of not feeling like you were creating and doing all the things that you love to do and both have the talent and skills to do and have learned to do, and then to get to this point where you created this work and it was so well received, and for you it just felt like an amazing accomplishment. It just speaks to that idea of figuring out, maybe it's not a one-woman play, but just for any women listening, especially moms, figuring out a way to bring to life in your own way that's something that fulfills you.
Yeah definitely.
I love that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just remembering how scary it was. I was like, it's an idea. You're like, yeah, maybe this could be a one-woman show. I really, I want to apply to this, festival. And then when I got in, I was like,
like, oh no, now I really have to do it.
Yeah. And like, how does one do all this?
How does one do all that?
Well, first step was finally, for the first time, really, hiring someone to like help take care of your children, which, that's always a process of itself in terms of like, but, I don't know, especially when you have a child with autism, you're very concerned because this person has to be extra special because they have to communicate to you what's going on. You have to rely solely on them for what's going on with your child because your child is not going to tell you necessarily. Well, my child is not going to tell me because he has, very limited verbal abilities. So that was that. But I was like, oh, well, I got to, so let me go do it. A lot. And I found someone who is wonderful and extraordinary. So for the time that my child wasn't at his program for the summer, some wonderful woman took care of him and my other child when he wasn't at camp. And so that was, I think that's, quite honestly, I think that's 50%. I think that's 50% of the work, like finding someone to, so that your mind can be completely free. that you
Right.
trust to take care of your children, so your mind can be completely free to be open to the creative process. And then the rest of it, the other 50% was extraordinarily hard, meaning I had to shift from producer mode, meaning, okay, I have to market this. I have to make sure I'm always on social media. I have to make sure that I have my marketing materials together. I have to do a photo shoot. I have to do like all that stuff, right? I have to hire people. Like I have to hire a production assistant. I have to hire a director. I have to hire this and lighting. So I had to do all that business stuff. And then I'd have to shift and I'd be that, okay, I need to write. I need to write. How is this arc going to go? How am I going to streamline this? You know, the book that I was working on it was the same premise, but it had more to it. You know, it had it had my Nigerian mother-in-law in there, and it had like more of my mother, more of my family history, more of my aunts, all that stuff. And I had to really streamline this. It had, my other child, and I had to just really focus. And then I had to add elements that would make it more theatrical rather than this, intimate document between, the reader and the page. So, how do I make it more theatrical? How do I adapt some of the things that I had? Because I really believe if you're creating your storytelling, you create for the medium.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I can't necessarily just take what I've written and it's, put it as a script. That really won't work. So I had to sort of figure that out. And then I had to put in, now that I'm creating a new arc, I have to fill it in with, some other stuff. So, and then, obviously the singing wasn't, so I had to do some things a little bit differently. And it was hard. And then after I had that done, I had to rehearse and perform. And I hadn't performed in about 1,500 years.
1,500. Now, how long was that period from
500 years?
How long was that period that you had to do all of this? Was it, was it a certain number of months, or what was your deadline like for doing all of this?
I did this in about 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why it was terrible. Let me tell you, there are times where because I'm like, oh, these ideas, these are such great ideas. And then I'm like, I'd be in the middle, I'd be, terrified. There would be moments of terror. I'd be like, what if this doesn't,
right.
What if I can't, and then I would just have to, the producer and me, okay, get up, just, you got to keep going. And it was lovely having a director who was so smart and understood the material and understood the piece, and having someone that I'd be accountable to. Obviously the festival had deadlines, but then also like I was like, other people are depending on me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not doing this in a vacuum. So it was always, that was so good for me to have that momentum and that motivation to be like, look, this is not just about me anymore. I got all these other people involved, so I have to get my stuff together, leave my worries on the floor and, just continue.
And the director was Janice Freeman Clark?
Yes.
Great. Now, was it good to have, I guess it doesn't necessarily, well, you tell me, did it matter having another woman involved with you while you created this?
All I can say is I can speak for this. It was wonderful having this woman. I mean, she doesn't have children with special needs, but she got it as a mother, as a parent. She also has a wonderful creative sensibility, this instinct. I mean, she runs her own, theater company, and, she has a lot of dealings in the arts. And she herself was a performer and has been directing for many, many years. And so it was just great to have someone I can trust with my story and also my insecurities as a performer, and say, look, this is what we're working with here. Like, shape me, mold me,
Right. Have her bring out the best in you.
Exactly. And as a producer and as a mother, I'm used to being like, no, you got to do this. No, you got to do it. And then here I was completely vulnerable and I was like, please tell me what to do.
Right. Plus it had been 1,500 years. So
exactly.
You might have been a little rusty.
Exactly. So it was, and she has such good taste and, a very good eye and a very good ear. I think, people don't really, well, I don't know what people do or not, but I think I may have underestimated, like, there's a rhythm in performance, in acting. And it's not just about having a great eye as a director. I think it's about having a really good ear, which I think I didn't fully understand before this process.
And how did you two find each other, or how did you find her?
Well, like so many other people who helped with the show, it's like I find them on the playground. You know what I mean? Like so many
Hmm.
people who helped with the show, whether doing my headshots or doing their logo or, creating ads, like they all were mothers whose path, our paths had crossed because of our children.
Really? So you literally, it was playground, like another
Yeah.
mom that you, I thought you were using that as a
No, like
metaphor.
it was literally like a schoolyard environment that I met all these wonderful
I
women.
love that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, it was so funny. There's this woman whose child goes to, her children go to the same school as my child, and I was, there was so much to do. I didn't have time to be going like all investigating and to see this person is that. I mentioned someone. I was like, yeah, I need someone to take headshots, and they're like, oh, this woman's great, and I was like, okay, and I just like talked to her when I saw her on the playground after school. And I was like, can you do? She's like, yeah. So then we said, and then like the day before the shoot, I was like, you know what? I probably should see what kind of work she's done before.
Right? Maybe to see if she can not at
I
least
mean,
chop my head off.
all I know is that she did fabulous pictures of the school play and she did great yearbook pictures, but I didn't really know. And then she's like, "Oh, here's my link." And I was looking at her, looking all through her portfolio, and she had photographed celebrities and Daniel Craig and like, I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this will do." And,
Wow.
yeah, and it's, there's so many people who are parents that may or may not work full time anymore, but that doesn't mean they have rich experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can never underestimate the power of a mother in so many different ways. So yeah, I'm very proud to say that there are so many, school related parents that were very helpful to me.
That's amazing. And I thank you for sharing that story. And also, it speaks to what this show is all about, this idea that support is sexy, because at least you were saying to people, oh, I really need headshots, or I really need to, because sometimes I feel like we go through life or experiences, especially when things are hard. As you said, during that time, you're trying so hard to do this, you forget to say, I need help with whatever this is, or I need a director for this play that I now have to do, or I need my pictures done, or that kind of thing. So it just shows that, you know, it can show up anywhere on the
Right.
playground, even.
Right. Yeah, it's true. And the director, I had seen her, I had met her through my son. My son and her daughter were friends, but I had, by meeting her, I had also gone to a show that she had directed,
Mm-hmm.
which is called Portrait of Ray, which was amazing. And I was like, oh, I'm going to approach her about doing my show. So yeah, I had seen her work, and I was like, no, I think this is going to be really good if she comes along for the ride. So I was
That,
very thankful that she did.
that's great, Doreen. I love that. Now, what would you say? Well, one thing I did want to ask: how was your family's response to seeing the play?
Okay, first of all, I have to tell you this. Okay, so the Fringe Festival, they are very strict about late seating. You can't have any there's no late seating, and there's no, yeah, so period. So you have to come on time. And so there was a show. My family was extraordinarily supportive from the beginning. And my cousins, like I have like 41st cousins, and like, I don't know, I think it was like 25 of them bought tickets to one of my shows. And so the show was not starting on time. I'm in the dressing room. I don't know anything that's going on, right? But I knew I could hear that it was very quiet, and my family is not quiet. And so I was like, what is going on? They're like, oh no, we're going to start soon. Don't you know, most of those 25 people were late coming from New Jersey to New York to see the show. And they arrived on a party bus
Of course,
that they had
because
rented.
how else?
Exactly. But they came out so full force. And they, the venue director, who was probably stressed out at the time, did wait. And and it was just so fabulous. That was one of my most fun performances because they were really engaged and they were like, oh yeah, I know that character. They knew all the characters and and I forget how many people I mention in my show that has to do with my family, an uncle, a cousin, or whatever. And so, they got all the insight and they were just very, very supportive, just being present and just, it was amazing. And one of my cousins said, Doreen, I think it's great that you're sort of documenting our family history in many ways. And my mother came to see the show, and I would say that my performance, I was a little nervous because my mother is such a focal point in the show. And, everything I say, I do say it, I don't really make anything up. It's not, what I attribute to her is hers. But I was just very concerned on how she would react. But she was extremely supportive and very happy for me. And yeah. She's like, I don't sound like that. Like, she didn't think the tone of voice that I.
She's like, if you're gonna do me, get it right.
Yeah, basically. I was like, okay. We probably sound more like in my regular speech, but you can't really. You have to sort of create a little bit more theatrical difference. So yeah, but that was good. I was relieved after that, but I was a little tense on the stage.
I love it. Now, what would you say is the greatest lesson this experience has taught you about yourself as a woman?
That's a good thing. Like that's a good. What have I learned about myself as a woman? I think I think it's just sort of speaking up for myself, even amongst the people who love me. Because I think, you learn to speak up at work, you learn to speak up, or at least I have, that was very familiar to me. Speaking up at work, speaking up, on behalf of my children, speaking up in so many parts of our lives. But when you're in your family unit, speaking up and say, you know what, we're going to have a little less of that will benefit all of you, and we're going to have a little bit more for me. And I think that, and so I think that was probably the biggest thing. And also remembering that, I would just say that my emotional life is, a very big part of who I am. And it brings so much to my creative presence in the world, and I have to honor that and be true to myself and be true about what I think my purpose here on life is, which is to create in whichever form that is.
And bravo to you for getting back to that and recognizing that, and not going on with the rest of your life regretting not pursuing that part of yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Now, what is next for you? What are you most excited about today?
Oh, today. I'm always very excited about bedtime for my children.
That's every day. What time is that? Around 7, 8 o'clock?
Oh, it's 7:30, 8. Yeah. But I think the thing that I'm excited about, like I've promised, I'm doing a lot of different things in terms of putting my show and this book that I'm working on back into the world. So I think, I get very excited about doing things like that every day, taking a little bit step further. So yeah, that's what I'm most excited about.
That's great. Now, thank you so much for sharing your story and being so open and telling us the ins and outs of the business, but also your life and your journey. It's been fun to get to know you.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
I have a couple more questions for you. If you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
Oh, I mean, I'd say my mother, no doubt. And I have said to her, I actually thanked her at the end of my last show, which is the one she came to. I stopped during the, I guess, curtain call. I sort of, asked everyone to stop clapping just so I can thank her and my father. but especially my mother, because I mentioned her so much in the play. And, and I, yeah, I wouldn't be here without her. I wouldn't, she sacrificed so much and she fought. I mean, I don't even think she would think of it as sacrifice, but she's a fighter. I come from a lot of, a number of matriarchs who were fighters. And she really did a lot to make sure that my sister and I had the best education, greatest opportunities. And I wouldn't be here if not for her pushing and advocating, whether it's moving us from Newark to Montclair, whether it's making sure I got a financial aid to a private school, like, whether she made sure that I knew, how to be respectful and polite, and got on me about, how I interacted with other people and, always putting my best foot forward and working hard, that she and my father both instilled. I would not be where I am today. And so, yeah. And I cried. I boo-hooed when I was doing it. And she was like, later she was like, why'd you have to do all that? You didn't have to do all that. Iron and everything.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, final question. How can we support you? Give us your website, and I'll have all of this linked up in the show notes for your episode, but tell people where they can find you and find out more about you.
Yeah, you can go to my website, which I have to update with the show, but it's www.doreenoliver.com, DOREENOLIVER.com. And if they wanted to get in touch with me, or if they think the show might be great in their city or their area, they can fill out a form on the contact page, and I will definitely get back to them. And then I'm also on Facebook. It's facebook.com/everythingisfineuntilitsnot. There's no apostrophe in it's, because URLs will not allow that, although it's not grammatically correct that way. But right. Yeah, so that's a way you can follow on the show. And you can also follow on Twitter. I'm at Doreen Oliver. DOREENOLIVER. And I'm hoping my goal is to definitely do a lot more shows in the spring with Autism Awareness Month and Mother's Day. So that's what I'm very excited about.
Wonderful. We are going to hold that intention for you. We'll be able to see the show this next spring.
Yes, if not before.
If not before. Awesome. Lastly, before you go, do you have a parting piece of advice for our listeners?
Oh.
About anything?
Yeah, I would just say be bold. Do not be afraid. Fear is never your friend. Yes, it can save you in certain instances. That is true. But don't be afraid to be bold and follow your dreams. It's just, there's nothing that's safe, or there's no path that's safe. There's no path that's completely safe or completely secure. So do what you love as much as you can, as early as you can.
Awesome. I love it. Doreen, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks again.
Okay, hold on just a second. All right. Thank you so much for listening to that episode of the Support is Sexy podcast. And I do hope that you got some inspiration from it. And the challenge is for you to do at least one thing. Take one thing from the episode, at least one thing. You can always do more, but at least one thing that will help you move one step closer to your dream. Whether that's launching a business, writing a book, whatever that thing is that you want to do, take something from this episode and move one step closer. And what I'll also ask of you, if you can tell me what you think about the episodes, what we've been doing, what you want to hear, what you like, what you experience while you're listening, go over to iTunes, leave us a review, and let me know what's going on. What are you thinking? What are you feeling about the show? What else can I do to be of service to you, which is what this is all about, to be of support to you. That's our buzzword, right? You can also go to our website, supportissexypodcast.com. That's supportissexypodcast.com. Hear more episodes there. Also have a bunch of great videos, tons of information. It's where I'm going to be spending a lot of time, and it's where I love to connect with you. So again, thank you so much for listening. I truly appreciate you and your support. And the most important thing I want you to remember is having it all does not mean doing it all alone. So now, go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.